What if art isn't just something you hang on a wall, but something that quiets your mind, heals old wounds, and helps you feel safe in the world again? Today, we explore how creativity becomes healing, how imagination becomes strength, and why art might be exactly what your nervous system needs. Welcome to Happiness on Tap. I'm your host, Leanne Herron, and my guest today is Kate Shaffer, a mixed media artist whose work is rooted in imagination, emotional healing, and the belief that art has the power to restore peace. Based in New Hampshire, Kate has been a creative for as long as she can remember. From discovering fine art in high school and realizing she could talk visually about her feelings to painting imagination landscapes inspired by childhood adventures and the book Pippi Longstocking. Her journey is one of resilience and beauty, working across watercolor, acrylics, pastels, collage, sand. Kate has just two questions when she creates. What do I want to say? And are these materials compatible in the way I want to use them? Her art is more than aesthetic. It's emotional refuge, a way to quiet the monkey mind, a way to bring beauty into a world that can feel overwhelming, a way to create safety and joy. Kate, welcome to the Happiness on Tap podcast. I'm so excited to have you here today.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm excited too.
So we'll get started right away. When did you first realize that art allowed you to talk about the things that you couldn't quite yet put into words?
Well, I think it's helpful for people to know my background a little bit. I am a survivor of trauma from a young age and was not able to talk about it, was afraid to talk about it. When I got into high school and worked with my art teachers, they talked a lot about what do you want to say? And I hadn't ever thought about saying anything with a painting or with a picture. And that kind of opened a door for me to realize that I could talk about things, I could talk about my feelings without having to tell people the stories that I was afraid to talk about. And the stress that was relieved while I was talking on my canvas made it even more imperative for me to to continue that journey with talking on canvas.
Thank you so much for sharing your story and how you got there, and then how your art teacher kind of encouraged you to use what you were creating as a way to share what you were feeling inside. I loved art in school. That was probably one of my favorite classes. We had the coolest art teacher. And so I remember that they were a different kind of encouraging than other teachers, where they wanted us to go to those places where other teachers really didn't want us going to those places. So it's so exciting that you were able to learn how to express things that had been trapped in your body, and you could now put them onto a canvas or, whatever mediums that you use, and get those things from what's stuck in your body to outside of your body, to release them. That is such a beautiful story. So thank you again for sharing that. You work with so many different materials: watercolors, acrylics, pastels, sand. How do you decide what each piece needs?
Well, there's a lot of experimentation that goes on in my studio before I even start a painting. Um, I need to know what the materials are going to do and how they're going to react with each other before I can figure out if these are the materials that I want to use for what I want. each particular painting to be. One of my big hurdles always is I can see where I want to go. And the question is, how do I get there with the materials that I have to use? There's one painting that I did called Spanish Guitar, and it uses pastel on top of acrylic. And everyone told me, you can't do that. You can't use pastel on acrylic. But that was the look I wanted. So there was a lot of experimentation to try to figure out how I could use pastel on acrylic, not having it framed because it's on a canvas and not having it rub off. But I finally got there and it now does what I want it to do. So it's deciding, do I want it to have texture? Do I want it to flow? Is it relaxing? Do I want to show some kind of conflict by using texture or brush marks? Or it's really decided by what I want to say in each piece.
That is wonderful. And I am not creative. And I would love to paint more. And I did paint a little bit when I was in my trauma recovery, but those things, not having that knowledge, I would pull out my canvas, I would have my acrylics and I would paint. And I'm kind of one of those people that can, paint by numbers. Give me an image already sketched on a canvas and I can paint it, I can give it life. But drawing something from a thought or a feeling or an emotion and pre-planning, like, what do I want? I'm looking at this beautiful picture behind you where the mountains have so much texture in what I see and how the water is and how the clouds move away. Like, all of that is thought that you put into it either beforehand or while you're painting it. And so thank you for sharing what your thought process is.
Well, first of all, I believe everyone is creative. I think we are created and have that creative part of us that gets stifled so much, especially in our society where art is diminished. It's not treated and respected as a educational aspect of a child's growth. It's like, oh, you're taking a free course by going into art class because you don't want to fail typewriting or whatever. So you can go to art class and if you show up, you get an A. Boom. So it's not treated and respected as a way for kids to learn how to think differently. And if you connect the dots and you realize that so many of our technological advances have come because there was some science geek who thought outside the box at some point. And, one of the things that always jumps into my mind is from the movie Apollo 13, where they are up there and all of the tech geeks come into a room with a box of everything that they have on the space shuttle and they dump it on the table and say, we have to put this round thing in this square spot and this is what we have. And they had to creatively figure out how to make that work. So creativity is not just for painting, it's for everything. But that aside, you're also not born knowing how to do art. That's a misnomer. Da Vinci and Michelangelo and all of these people, yes, they had an innate talent. But if they had not gone to the atelier at age 8 and worked at that until they were in their 20s, they would not have been the artists that they became. No one would have ever known that they had this talent. So art is a learned process like everything else. And now that I've been doing it for, 10 years or so professionally, there are things that come to my mind now to look at that I never would have thought of when I started. When I started, it was all experimentation. It's like, I have no idea what these things are going to do. And I dripped and I splashed and I spread on sand and glued down leaves. And a lot of it was a big mess. I will tell you that right now. It's a learned thing. And I would encourage people, if they feel like they really want to try this, then just go for it. Don't be afraid. And you don't have to show anybody. Like, I have dozens of pages that I've never shown anybody and probably never will. My kids will find them when they go through my stuff afterwards and go, whoa, mom really wasn't any good at this when she started.
I love that. When I opened my office, the one thing I wanted to do, because my husband and I are very involved in our local art community here, I wanted to use my walls as gallery space for all of my amazing artist friends, for all those pieces of art that are sitting in a closet, in a bedroom. They're not the pieces they take to their shows. They may be years old that they don't think they'll ever get rid of or have interest in. Those are the pieces that I wanted hanging on my walls, and I would host gallery shows for them. There was times where I would just have one artist and let her do all my four walls, and host a show so that they could bring attention to these pieces, plus the pieces that they normally hang at shows or sell, or prints that they might sell at pop-up events, that kind of stuff. And for me, the sheer joy of being surrounded by art from my favorite artists just made me glow every day. It was so exciting to go to work. I think even at home, like, every piece of art in our house is something from a local artist. And I get joy in dusting, because I'm dusting off and making sure that this art is displayed the best way, that there isn't smudges on the glass. And it just brings me such joy to be surrounded by art.
Yes. Yes, and they're finding that in places of business, that people's productivity increases when they have art that they like, when they're allowed to have little things in their spaces. People that still work in a cubby, when they're allowed to have something small up that is artistic, whether it's something their kid did or some little piece they bought at an art show, or any kind of art counts. And it's all about, if this is something you love, of course it's going to raise your spirits. Of course it's going to bring that little smile in the middle of the day when you've got some mundane or stressful thing in front of you that you know you have to do before you go home. And you can just pause for a second and you can look at that piece of art and just take a breath, and then you can go back to work and feel a little bit revived.
Absolutely. I was always pretty lucky, even when I was either in a cubby or had an office of my own. When I moved into my first little office as a paralegal, I was right across the hall from our law clerks. So these were young kids, just starting law school, and they would come in and just to enjoy the art on my walls. And they'd come and chit chat and ask about certain pieces. Same with the art in my office. People would walk by going to another business, and I would have my blinds open and they would see the art on the wall and they would stop and ask to come in and see the art. So I love to be able to share that with people, because it would make them curious. They'd want to know more about the artist, or they'd be drawn to it. I've had small children uh, that were children of other people that worked in the building that would come. And then I would get together with the artist and buy a print of whatever piece the child was really responding to or resonating with, and be able to give them that as a gift for their own homes. And art just brings me such joy. And so that's one of the reasons I was so excited to talk to you and learn more about what you do in your creative process. And how did your childhood experiences shape the landscapes in the worlds that you paint today?
Well, so much of it was the books that I read. You know, Pippi Longstocking, you mentioned, this little girl with the crazy braids that goes out and has these incredible adventures. And I grew up on a farm, so I had a lot of land available for me to, and it was mid-state New York, lots of rolling hills. There was a sugar maple forest, really, up behind the pasture that I would go to regularly. There was a little stream. So there was a lot of places that I could go and just imagine. And it was a way for me to mentally take myself out of the situation that I was in and imagine myself in a totally different environment, a beautiful place. When you have trauma at such a young age, whatever that trauma is, it's easy to get caught up in the darkness that is present in this world. But I had to determine at a very young age that there was enough darkness that if I did not grab a hold of beauty and light, that it would just pass me by, that I could get swallowed up in this. Um, and I and I just refused, I guess. I was headstrong enough to just say, no, I'm not going to let this steal me as a whole person. So reading those books and later when I read Lord of the Rings and other adventure, Three Musketeers and Tarzan and all these different adventure stories, I decided as I got older that these were the places that I wanted to paint. These were the places that I could see in my head, but I wanted to be able to see them and talk about them and share them with other people who might need that imaginary place to go to sometimes.
I love that. I love that. I think for me, mine was Peter Pan. I had a very
Yes.
traumatic childhood. And honestly, I don't remember reading or even having an imagination as a child to be able to escape the trauma. The only, when I would try to have an escape, like journaling or keeping a diary, that was taken from me as a child. My parents had a lot of distrust in each other in their marriage. And so, as normal, that rolls downhill. And so then my parents didn't trust me or my brother. And so my mom would search me before I would go to school. She would look for any signs that I had maybe written something down about what was going on within our
Yeah.
home because she was afraid I would share it with a teacher or a friend and somebody would find out that our home life wasn't how they were portraying it to the public, or somebody would find out about the abuse in the house. And so I don't really remember having that ability as a child because I spent my whole childhood walking on eggshells and trying to keep the peace and trying to make sure that things were as calm as I could possibly have them, keep the house clean, do my chores. I never really remember having much of a childhood full of imagination and wonder. So thank you for sharing that because I think that is such a beautiful reminder of what is possible for children, for adults, that we can all have imagination, that ability to visualize ourselves somewhere else. I'm going to continue to look at that picture behind you because like I'm so drawn to just visualizing myself standing on that edge of the cliff above the water. Because one of the visualizations I did through meditation for letting go a lot of that bag of bricks of stuff that I carried from childhood on through my adulthood, that visualization for me was walking to a cliff and taking off that backpack of bricks and throwing it into the water and watching it disappear in the water. So I am very drawn to that picture behind you because it just takes me to that place where I was able to let go of so many things that I had been carrying.
And that's so important. People don't realize how important it is what you allow yourself to think and dwell on. That's one of the reasons I love art journaling, is because I too was always worried about other people seeing what I had written. Um, Especially when I got to become a mom. I talked about a lot of things in my head, and the idea of writing them down and having one of my daughters find it was terrifying to me. They know my story now, but I certainly wasn't all about them learning it when they were 7 or 8 years old. So my response to that was, I'm going to write it out and then I'm going to paint over it. So that's what I did. And it was really cathartic for me to finally be able to get my feelings out and then cover it up so that I didn't have to worry about other people seeing it. But it was also a way for me to say, okay, I got that out. It's buried. I don't need to think about it anymore. And that was actually more helpful to me than therapy was. The first therapist that I had just wanted me to talk about it over and over and over again. And it just kept me in that place of constantly thinking about it, constantly being worried about it, dwelling on it. And I can't live like that. I don't think anybody really can live like that. So this was a way for me to talk about a lot of things, even things that are fleeting. When you have that fight with your spouse or your best friend, or you just want to throttle your kid, you know, and maybe that only lasts 15 minutes while you're writing it down and then it's gone. But you don't want somebody reading that and thinking, my gosh, is that how she really feels about me? So it was a way for me to say, okay, I got this out. It's buried under paint now and it's covered up with something beautiful, something happy. It's bright colors, it's fun doodles. I remember having this music on when I painted that picture, and that was a song that made me feel happy. So it's a way to do that catharsis and again, not have to talk about it out loud.
Thank you for sharing that. I think that's a wonderful suggestion for people to find an avenue to be able to do that, because so long, the majority of us will just push those feelings down, ignore them, deny them. And that's what I lived my life doing. When I was going through my trauma healing journey, I tried talk therapy, same thing, didn't like that feeling, didn't want to continue to rehash a lifetime of my childhood memories. And so I threw myself into finding all these different modalities, from meditation to art to working with rope, working with my hands, gardening, being in nature, hiking. I focused on finding the things that brought me joy
Mhm.
and not the things that brought me misery and heartache and pain and emotional turmoil that like you said, you can't escape it when it's center of thought all the time. And so for me, art was grab a coloring book and either crayons or colored pencils or watercolors or markers, and I would just surround myself with all these different implements and I'd pick the picture and then I would decide, okay, oh, I think this one would look beautiful in watercolors, or I think this one would look beautiful in colored pencil. And I would sit on the floor and I would turn on cartoons and I would watch a cartoon while coloring in a coloring book. And that would bring me the greatest amount of joy. And I wasn't thinking about whatever anxiety may have popped up, or depression or panic. All those things just stopped existing in that moment. And I could just enjoy all the other things. Same with, gardening, walking, just walking outside, taking off my shoes, walking barefoot through my grass, putting my hands in the dirt, talking to my plants, talking to the birds and the squirrels and, whatever was going on outside. And just what a beautiful day. The sun is shining, the sky is blue, and I am safe.
Yes, yes. And all of those things, everything that you do that is creative in nature, even coloring in coloring books counts. A lot of people think, oh, it's just a coloring book. No, it's a way for you to switch off that part of your brain that overthinks and dwells and worries and forecasts into the future and rehashes whatever negative thing you had happen that day or a week ago. Um, the brain is an interesting thing. We have the two hemispheres, and people think of them as separate entities, but they are in fact connected. And you have your logic brain, and that logic brain is a problem solver. So when you've had something happen, even if it's something as simple as you got an email that said that you hadn't paid this month's mortgage payment and you were sure you did, and you're at work and you can't look it up right now, and you've got that going on in your brain, that's the logic side of your brain is trying to solve this problem, right? And if you can't get home right away after work, if you've got to pick up a kid from soccer and then you've got a meeting, with the women's group, or, something else is going on all the time, that's brewing in the background of your brain of, how do I check on this? And I can't find the check and I can't find this. And art takes that logic brain and just flips the switch and says, I'm not going to think about that right now. I'm just going to concentrate on this little space that I'm coloring or this doodle that I'm making. I just want to see where this line is going to go right now. And it quiets that monkey mind from overthinking, or in my case, I don't know if you're like this. Whenever I'm what I call forecasting, thinking about what could happen if, my brain always goes to the worst possible place. You know, my daughter's away at college and she's going to a party at the frat house, and oh my gosh, she's, they're going to put something in her drink, and and it's like it just goes to the worst possible scenario. And I need a way to quickly quiet that brain. Otherwise, it just goes and continues to go. And even if all I do in the moment is put on a song and dance in the kitchen, that helps quiet that monkey mind and say, you know what? She's going to be okay. This is going to be all right. This is not a disaster, and that's why I listen to music at night if I'm worried about something. I'll turn it on and it helps me go to sleep. It's why I have a sketchbook handy, or I do needlework at nighttime as something different from my job, my art business, and I will work on that. And it helps me not dwell on things and go places that I shouldn't go. With the way the news is today, we could all dwell on the worst case scenario of any number of things, but it doesn't help us to go to those places. It increases our stress levels. It increases our chances of having colds and heart problems and high blood pressure and digestive issues and all of the things that stress makes for us that's negative. So feeding it art, music, and beauty is a way to tell that stress, you're not really welcome here. Calm calm down.
Yeah, I love that. I'm the same way. I will not sit and doom scroll. I won't, be in the room when the news is on. I had to train myself because when I was going through my trauma recovery was in the early days of the pandemic. And at that time you couldn't escape the news. That was the center of attention, was that fear that they were building in us. And I had never experienced anxiety and panic. So all of a sudden, when I'm going through this trauma, I'm having anxiety and panic and hypervigilance. And I was afraid to leave my house. And I was like, what is this? I don't even know how to verbalize what my body and my mind are experiencing because I'd never experienced it before. And what I quickly realized was my husband is a newsmonger. Like, he could read the news, watch the news, read news magazines all day long, and it doesn't affect him.
Mhm.
But what it was doing to me was completely different. I mean, it was like enveloping this negative energy within my body that I wasn't used to experiencing. And so I would tell him, like, if my only option to spend time with you is to sit in the room with you when the news is on, I will be outside. I will be in another room behind closed doors. I am going to go do a meditation. It's not that I don't want to spend time with you. It's not that I don't want to sit next to you on the couch, but I can choose where I want my energy to go. And this was not where I wanted my energy to go. And when I really realized how much it was affecting me was two different little things. And at the time, my husband was also a smoker. So he would have to go to a gas station to buy cigarettes. And I would be with him in the car and I would stay in the car while he would run in. And I would have so many panic attacks just in the amount of time that he would get out of the car and walk into the gas station that, I was like constantly checking to make sure the doors were locked, being hyper vigilant about everybody around me, watching the door, being afraid that the gas station was going to get robbed and he was going to be inside because everybody was wearing masks. And so it just really heightened that fear for me. And, so I used to tell him, like, okay, if this is again going to be a situation, I think it's best if you stop on your way home from work than to have me sit in the car because I am just suffering these huge panic attacks until he would come out and get in the car and I would lock the doors and we would drive away. And then I was fine. The other time that I realized how much effect it was having on me was I had quit my job in the legal field because it was a case that we had taken and became a personal trauma trigger for me that I couldn't escape. And it was reliving a trauma from 20 years earlier that I had never treated for. And so my only option for escape was to quit my job because there was no avenue for accommodations to protect myself or any way that I could. And so I took a year off and worked on healing my mental health, my physical health. And I had been offered a job at my favorite local coffee house. And inside, I was jumping for joy because I loved this place. But at the same time, again, it was during the pandemic. The person who was running the coffee house was in there alone from 5 o'clock in the morning until 9 o'clock in the morning before the rest of the stores in the shop would open up. And people were coming in masked up. And so I sat down at my computer to pull up my resume and had a panic attack. I was like, can't do that. Not going to put myself in an unsafe space because
Mhm.
all I could go to was, all these stores in our neighborhood were having a lot of crime. Crime was just terrible then.
Mhm.
And I think people were taking advantage of being masked up.
Yeah.
And so it scared me to death. And I was like, okay, I am obviously not healed. I am obviously still having this anxiety, but it was figuring that out. Like, okay, I know what this is. I know what my triggers are. I know what's causing me to have this hypervigilance. And I think once I took control of understanding it and naming it, then I was slowly but surely getting my safety back because I could choose my safety.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, it was quite an experience. But, I love now that I even like pat myself on the back more often than not because my memory is back. And my memory was taken away from me for a year. Like I couldn't remember people I had worked with for 20 years. And like you said, it's that when you're living in that fight, flight, and freeze all the time and what it's doing to your body, getting sick all the time, having chronic exhaustion, nauseous. I wasn't able to sleep. Then I was having gut issues. And I was at no point did my doctor ever ask me what my stress level was.
Ugh.
It's like,
Yeah.
it amazed me that that was the furthest thing from her mind in treating me, even though I was very specific and I'm experiencing this and this and this and this and this. It was like, oh, okay, here, let me hand you an antidepressant and
Yeah.
you'll be fine. So, finding those other modalities like art was just such a godsend to me. And, learning that how quickly you can change those thoughts. Like you said,
Yes.
just doodling on a piece of paper, turning on a song that brings you happiness, going outside in nature. I mean, we have so much available to us to change those things in our lives.
Yes. Yeah. And the big key is recognizing it. That's one of the difficulties with having art be so diminished is that it's coloring books are finally getting recognized as an adult thing. But for years, coloring books were for kids. Coloring books, I mean, I can't imagine 20, 30 years ago when I was in my 30s, if somebody said to me, if I had told somebody that I wanted to do coloring books, it would have been like, you're doing coloring books, And the whole idea of it was just, this is for children, totally not recognizing you're concentrating on something that is outside of the situation that you're in. And when you're looking at painting or drawing or doodling, it's one of the reasons that Zentangle is such a big deal, is because all you're thinking about is drawing that line and drawing the next line. And how does this pattern interact with the other things that I have done on the page? Does this, I've got all these straight things. Maybe I want something curly in here, so I'm going to do the curly line. And that's all I'm going to think about right now. And it's so important, especially for women. And I know this is going to sound sexist or whatever to some people, but I think women never really get time off. For years, my husband didn't understand that because we didn't have the money to go to hotels and that sort of thing, we went camping. And I would tell him, camping is not a vacation for me. I mean, yes, I'm in a different spot and I'm out in nature and all those things were good, but I still had to think about everybody's clothes and did I have the right clothes for everybody and all the food that needed to be taken and then the cooking and the cleaning up afterwards and making sure that my daughter's sneakers were dry after she went through the creek down the road, and all of those things are still a factor, and especially when women work outside the home. You've got to concentrate on work all day, and as soon as you get out of work, what are you thinking about? Dinner? Picking the kids up? Taking the kids somewhere else? Do they have a soccer practice that I have to pick them up for? And does somebody else have piano lessons? I have to pick them up. And how am I going to juggle this time? And then I have to get home and we have to eat and things have to get cleaned up. And so's band uniform has to be washed and the baseball uniform has to be cleaned. And, you're constantly thinking about the next thing. I think the biggest thing, the biggest favor a woman could do for herself is to set aside 15 minutes where this is your time and do not talk to me. I don't care if, unless somebody is bleeding, I don't want to know. There's a great story from Martin Luther, not Martin Luther King, but Martin Luther from the 1500s. His mother used to have a time where she prayed, and they had a slew of kids, like 13 children. So she always had chaos around her. She would sit at the dining room table and put a blanket over her head. And all the kids knew if mom was under the blanket, you leave her alone, you know? And I think that's perfect. Moms need to do that, have a space or a time or a room and, put that sign on the door that says, do not disturb. And if they're fighting, they'll work it out. If somebody has to have help with their homework, they can ask an older brother or sister, they can ask dad, or they can wait 15 minutes. 15 minutes is not an earth-shattering amount of time to set aside for yourself. And as your kids get older, you can set aside a little more time and look forward to empty nest syndrome.
Yeah, you covered all of my favorite things in there and things that I love to work with my clients because my primary focus is women in midlife who are
Mhm.
in transition. And the majority of those are coming up on empty nest syndrome. They're coming out of long term marriages, they're changing careers or retiring. And the reason I specifically chose that group of women was because I am that woman and I never had an aunt or a mother or a teacher or a counselor or anyone ever tell me that I needed to do that. And
Mhm.
so it wasn't until I was almost 50 that I learned the term giving from a full cup
Yeah.
and the importance of self care and the importance of taking that time. Nobody ever told me. It was just do for others, do for others, do for others, keep everybody happy, take care of the kids, take care of the family, do all those things which you were talking about. But no one ever talked to me about take just a few minutes to yourself, find that quiet time, find that peace, replenish your energy. And then when you're operating from a full cup or operating from the overflow, you can be your best self and still be able to do all those things.
Yes. Yeah.
And like I said, nobody ever told me. So I, learned about it after I hit the wall in full overwhelm. And then I started learning this term and I was like, why am I just learning this at 50? Why did nobody ever tell me, hey, you need to take some time for you? And so, one of the things that I like to teach my clients and work with my clients on is what I call roll bleed. So, it's that time from you get up in the morning and you have from, okay, 5 a.m. to 8 a.m. What happens in that time? Is there time in that from 5 to 5:30 that's me time?
Mhm.
Then there's the pack the lunches and get everybody ready, get everybody woke up, get breakfast, all those things. And then you have that role switch to now I'm a corporate woman, I'm going to work, I've got to be on all the time, to then the next switch at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock when you're back into mom time and you're running around and you're picking up the kids and you're doing all those things. And then the last switch is after all the kids go to bed and you have that little bit of me time again.
Yeah.
But, so I like them to kind of map that out and look at it as far as quadrants of your day
Mhm.
and be able to have a shift in between those roll bleeds where you wash off that previous shift. So if it's coming home from the corporate world and you've been in the car, you're picking up the kids, and then you walk in the door, wash your hands. Just take a few minutes and fill the soap and the warm water and rinse off the day and leave that there. Let that run down the drain and be present for that next phase of enjoying a meal with your husband, with your children, but not constantly bringing those things into all parts of your day from morning to night to where it's like one big blur.
Yes. Yes.
And you had also had brought up adult coloring books not really being a thing. They are now, which is wonderful. I mean, you can go into any store and you can find mandala coloring books, just something to sit and put your
Hmm.
creativity and energy and peace and joy into. One thing I also did is I created a coloring book, and I have it, it's alphabet affirmations reflections coloring book. So each letter of the alphabet has like a giant A, and it's surrounded by different flowers. And then at the bottom, after you've colored it, it has a prompt.
Nice.
So it gives you both the coloring and the written word to connect with. And so that was one of the digital products that I put together that's available on my website. And I love for people to take that time, print it out. You can print off one piece of paper, pick a letter that is you're drawn to for the day. You don't have to go in any order, and just take time and be present in that moment. And I love hanging them up around the house and seeing those different things and reading those prompts, whether it's reminding yourself that you are worthy, you are you are beautiful, you are happy, whatever that prompt may be. Sometimes we need to see those things visually. So I'll also take like a black permanent marker and write on my bathroom mirror if I need a positive affirmation for the day. Because especially as women, I think a lot of us, we get ready in front of a mirror, but we honestly don't even look at ourselves in the mirror.
Yes. Very true. Yeah.
Yeah, I can do my hair, I can do my makeup, I can brush my teeth, but did I actually like look and connect with my eyes, to the person
Right.
standing there? So yeah, there's so much in what we can do to find that peace and joy and stability and strength in our day. What would you say to someone who believes that they're not creative but feels overwhelmed and stuck?
I would say don't tell yourself anything you don't want to believe. We can convince ourselves of lots of things. It's at the root of body dysmorphia. How many really beautiful young women that complain about their hips being too big, or their bust isn't large enough, or they have terrible hair, or there's something they don't like. They're telling themselves that over and over again. Their brain begins to believe it. It's the same way with creativity. If you tell yourself, "I can't draw a straight line. I don't know how to be creative. I don't know how to do that." I would say evaluate what it actually means to you to be creative. Are you comparing yourself to Picasso, Van Gogh, Da Vinci? Well, you haven't had 40 years of training to get to that place. You know, that's that's a false equivalent. What is it that you want to accomplish by being creative? Are you talking about doing something for yourself in a sketchbook that you close up and you put away and nobody sees? Then what difference does it make what it looks like? It makes no difference at all. You're not thinking about selling your art. You're not even thinking about showing it to your kids or your husband. It's just for you. Then it doesn't matter what it looks like. If it makes you happy, then why not? Why not pick up the pencil, pick up the pen, pick up the paintbrush, start throwing paint. There are lots of things that people can do to help loosen themselves up. And one is just to doodle. Get it cheap, like one of those, oh, what are they called? You can buy them in Barnes and Noble. You can buy them in a stack of like 10. They're little notebooks with craft paper type colored, and they're cheap. They're like $1 a piece. Go get a pen, one of those notebooks that's got nothing in it, and open it up and just start to doodle. Start with something you enjoy. Do you like to look at hearts? Draw hearts. See how many different kinds of hearts you can draw. Start doodling inside the hearts to see how you can make them look different. Color them. Do you like me? I like swirly marks, you know? So make swirling marks and see how you can make them intersect and create something out of those. And then color them in. Get colored pencils and have yourself a little fanny pack or something that you can put those things in. And when you're done, you put them all away and it doesn't take any space. But what you're doing in that is taking these things that don't take up very much physical space, and you are allowing them to make space in your mind, letting go of the stress and the worries and the thoughts and the fears, and opening yourself up to appreciating calmness and joy and beauty for its own sake. A tree doesn't ask the world, should I exist? A flower just blooms. It doesn't compare itself, a daisy doesn't compare itself to a peony. One is very showy and one is a rather plain, ordinary flower. But when all those daisies bloom together, it's magnificent. So I would tell people, if you think you're only a daisy, bloom anyway.
I
Be
love
your
it.
magnificent.
Be your magnificent self in everything you do. I love it. I love it. I love it. I had a gentleman on the podcast a few months ago. And I'm trying to think of the title of his episode. It was Love Grows When You Bloom, if I remember correctly. I would have to look it up. But that's exactly what he talks about. So everything in how he works with women is in relation to that rose, and remembering that that rose isn't seeing you coming and thinking, I have to bloom because you're coming to look at me. It's just blooming.
Yes.
And it's not blooming to compare itself to the rose next to it, because the rose next to it may be a pink rose and this may be a yellow rose. And there is no comparison in their beauty. They're both individually beautiful in their own right, and how they grow and how they bloom, and what may attract one person to one color of a rose uh, may not attract another person. You could have two people walking together, and one person may see that yellow rose and go, "Oh my God, that's the most beautiful rose I've ever seen." And the other person's like, This is just a yellow rose. I like this rose." It's just remembering that like you said, if you're telling yourself you're a daisy, then be a daisy and just bloom and be beautiful and share that gift with the world.
And embrace the things that you love. And remember that creativity doesn't come in a box. Creativity is what we make it. Maybe you love to cook and you're one of those people that really loves to find the new recipe, that something unique that you haven't made before. Or maybe you're the person that likes to play with recipes that you already know how to do. I'm kind of like that. So I have a white cake. It's called the master cake recipe. And I do all kinds of stuff with that cake. Chocolate chip cake and cookies and cream cake and peppermint candy cake. And so I like to experiment in the kitchen. That's a form of creativity. And if you're worried about making all these things that you don't want to sit around and eat, take them to work with you, send them to school. I'm sure your kids' schoolmates would love a batch of peppermint cupcakes, that they could have that wasn't for anything special. Take them to the elderly person next door, or, if you're part of a church or a community group, take them with you there. You're getting not only the joy of creating the stuff, but you're getting the joy of sharing the stuff. And all of this feeds into putting down the darkness, the evil, the fear that is a part of our world. The more we share good, beauty, joy, creativity, the more we share that with other people, the more it grows. It's like that old L'Oreal commercial with the shampoo. I told two friends, and they told two friends, and they told two friends, and that's the way it works. Whether you're talking about fear or whether you're talking about joy and love and gratitude. So you share with a couple of friends, then they feel better. And when they feel better, they'll share it with their families, and their families will feel better, and their kids will probably fight less, and they'll get along with their friends better, and that will go out. And it's just this huge ripple effect that we don't see because we're not there. We're not looking above to say, oh, what's the effect of what I'm doing? It's nice when that happens, when you see the long-term effects, when you see the extended effects, but it's not reality for most people. You know, you have to be confident that that is indeed what happens though. So, do those doodly hearts on a piece of paper and it comes out really nice. Put it in a frame and give it to somebody.
It matters. I'm going to
Yeah,
show you real quick a little piece of paper that sits on my computer monitor that was given to me by a girl at a drive-through at my favorite coffee shop. I'm going to see how I can share it. I
there
don't know
we
if you can
go.
see it.
Yes. Yep.
And, I was waiting for my coffee order at the drive-through and she handed me this piece of paper. And I have had this piece of paper for probably 4 years. And it sits in front of me on my computer monitor every day. I get to see it every day. And I'm reminded that that was her kindness that she shared with me that day. And so, yeah, we don't always see that ripple effect. And if we're practicing intention and remembering how much we do contribute to that ripple effect in the world, both positive and negative, I think it can help us be more intentional about not sharing the negative and finding that way to share the positive, the gratitude, the joy, the kindness, all of those things in the world.
Yes. Something that I've recommended to people, you have your little sketchbook, your notebook, your colored pencils. When you sit at night, do a little of that before you go to bed. And then the very last thing, write something gratitude, something good, something that you remember from the day. And it doesn't have to be anything special. You know, it could be, I'm thankful they finally let my kid play today, because he was bench sitting all this time. And, they let my kid play. Or I tried this new recipe and it came out beautifully. It's a success. They don't have to be big, huge things. Every little thing, every little good thing that you take into yourself multiplies. It multiplies with your attitude. It multiplies with being able to go to sleep, thinking of good things. And the better you sleep, the better your next day will be. I mean, that's just a scientific fact. If you're not sleeping well, it affects how you respond in the world, how you function in the world. So if you go to bed relaxed, you've had your little art time, you've written your gratitude or your inspirational quote or whatever you decide that you want to write next to that little piece of art that you've done. And then you close it up and you think, yeah, that was good. Do that again tomorrow, and tomorrow you wake up and you feel more rested. And it's a feedback loop. And negativity is exactly the same kind of feedback loop. I've been worried about something. I haven't slept well. I wake up, I'm cranky. I yell at my kids. I'm impatient. I haven't focused well at work. Now I have stress that I didn't get my work done. And that makes me more stressed at home. And now I've slept even worse. And we're going into the next day. You know, it's that same feedback loop. So intentionality is so important and not thinking of yourself as a victim of your circumstances. I think of two very different scenarios that I have experienced with a couple of friends. I had one friend that was going through cancer and she didn't talk about it. She didn't tell anybody. And I was one of her best friends and she didn't tell me until she was very sick. She kept all this to herself and it ate away at her. She didn't have any support. Her sister was the only one who knew. She didn't even tell her own son, who lived far away. She kept all this and it just ate her up from the inside. And her last days were miserable, solitary days where she didn't feel like she had anybody she could tell. And she had convinced herself that she didn't want our pity, and that was her answer to it. My other friend, however, also a cancer, fighting cancer, she reached out to people. She reached out to the people that she knew would help her laugh, that would help keep her positive, that would encourage her to eat well and not push her beyond limitations that cancer treatment gives you, but that would say, "Hey, we're doing this. You're welcome to come if you want." And she knew that that was an environment where they weren't going to talk endlessly about her cancer. They were going to laugh about a movie they watched or a book they read or some old stories from their childhood. And it was just going to be a fun time for her to get out of herself. Her recovery was miraculous because she chose the people that were going to be positive, that were going to help her keep positive, as opposed to just getting all caught up in her own worries and her own false narratives. And we do that with things that are much less serious than cancer, but still damage us if we choose to catastrophize. If we can do things that help us stay positive, that help us find joy in the everyday. We were created to have our feet in grass and our dirt under our nails. And I think we need to embrace that. And going out on your patio and looking at your beautiful garden and sketching some of those flowers so you can go back and look at that in the middle of winter and remind yourself that spring is coming. Those are all really good things to hold on to. And you have control over those things. We all have control over how we respond to what the world hands us.
Absolutely. 100%. Thank you for sharing both of those stories because I think People, like you said, we tend to get in this like victim mentality. Why is this happening to me? And then not wanting to share it with others because you feel like you went from superwoman to being broken, or I don't want their pity, or I don't want, whatever that is. But when we can change that narrative and find those people to connect with, greater community within our family, within our friends, it really does have the power to heal.
Yes.
And so that is such a powerful message. And I want to thank you again for sharing that. Kate, I'm loving this conversation. You are sharing so much. It is so beautiful and so powerful. Where can people connect with you?
I have a website. It's kateshafferstudio.com. I have also just started a brand new community. I did not want to start something on Facebook or some of these other social media platforms. So, right now, everything, because it's a brand new community, and I very much want feedback from people, the kinds of things that they would like to participate in. Um, the aim of it is that there will be classes that will be available, some free, some paid. There's going to be online times to get together. As we grow, people can split off into various little subgroups to share and talk about challenges and get advice, critiques if you want critiques on what you're doing and your artwork. And I'll be sharing little mini classes that will be free, and chance to show your own work, to say, look what I did, and when you're ready to show that, and it is an absolutely judgment free zone. So it's, if they want a critique and they ask, how can I make this better? There are definite rules that, how to give critiques kindly. So there, there's a difference to me between a critique and a criticism. So criticism is not allowed. Critique, brackets with positive, improvement, and positive. That's the way that works. So, I will ask you, what are you trying to do? What are you trying to say? How do you want it to look? Exchanging views with other people, getting encouragement from other artists and other journalers. So I would love to have people come. It's all free right now. You can find that on my website. It's called The Artful Hearth. The idea behind it is that over history, women have always gathered in front of the fire, whether it was cooked together, sew together, quilt together, knit together. That's the way they had community and fellowshiped with one another, because in times past, without all of our modern conveniences, women's work was really never done. So you got a chance to visit with your friends and exchange and get encouragement and love from women who knew what you were going through, and still be able to get your work done, you know? So that's the idea behind the Artful Hearth, is that we will gather together as women for encouragement and uplifting and sharing beauty and joy and lots of laughter, I hope. And that it'll just be a community that's very accepting and loving, and everyone will be welcome.
I love it. I love it. I think that's a great invitation, a beautiful invitation for people to come when they're looking for community. Uh, Again, it goes kind of to real quick. When I opened my office, I hosted a women's circle, and I would post whatever we were going to do for that week up on like all events. And it would just amaze me at the number of women that were seeking that community. And all of a sudden, I would get a notification that somebody had purchased a ticket, and I always did like $5, and it was enough to have money to buy supplies so that we could do different projects or whatever it was. Because I hosted both education and then fun art projects. And I would bring in mediums and we would have sound baths and we just did all these wonderful things. And I loved the community that grew out of that. We were all ages from all over the world.
Hmm.
And that was our time to come together, leave the work at work, and just be in community with women. And so that is so powerful. I thank you for creating something like that, a space for people to come together and learn of these different techniques and get that positive feedback because that is so important. So thank you again. If this conversation stirred something in you, maybe a memory, maybe a longing to create, maybe just a deeper exhale. That's the power of art in its quiet work. Kate reminds us that beauty isn't frivolous, it's medicine. In a world that can feel loud and chaotic, creating or simply surrounding yourselves with art that feels safe and joyful is an act of resilience. And if this episode resonated, share it with someone who could use a little more beauty and peace in this world. And until next time, keep choosing what helps you feel steady, strong, joyful, and alive. Kate, thank you again for your time, for the beautiful stories that you shared, for your inspiration, and for creating a community like this to bring people together. It is such an inspiration.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me on. It's been such a joy getting to know you.
And you as well. I mean, I was excited for this conversation just from our little meet beforehand. And so I just really appreciate you coming on here and sharing so much of how you got there and what you do with it to help other people learn different techniques for healing themselves, for getting out of our own heads, for finding peace and joy and beauty in the world. So thank you so much. I appreciate you.